Hi guys, it's Sandy with Sandy Cogdill Designs, and today I have an adorable dino card. I am using a few of Trinity Stamp's new products from their recent release. I am using the Starring Sentiments I Love a You along with the Tiny Island die set. I also brought in a dinosaur from a stamp set that they released last year. It's called Terrific Dinos. This would be an adorable card for any occasion, and especially Valentine's Day, even though it's the summertime. Goodness. All right, let's get started. All right, I am going to start out coloring my little dinosaur. Now, this dinosaur is from the Terrific stamp set, and it also has a coordinating die. I am using Copic markers. The first color that I'm using, which is my very lightest color, is YR20 and YR21. And I'm using that on the little Triceratops horns and the little pads of his feet. So my lightest color is the base, and then I'm just going to do a little bit of shading with the YR21. Next, I'm going to start on the body of my Triceratops. I'm going to be using YR23. And when I use Copic markers, I like to lay down my lightest color over the entire surface. For me, that just helps me when I start blending. I always am amazed at people who can, just do their dark into the medium, into the light. And I know it's much quicker, and eventually I'll get there, but not today. Anyway, we're going to use that lighter color, get those areas colored in, and then we'll start shading. Next, I'm moving into the YR24, and I'm just going kind of where there'd be some shadows. I'm still leaving a little bit of light, basically in the center of his face, up at the top of his, I don't know what you call that thing at the top of his head. Looks like a fin to me. And then at the top of his tail and some spots on the body. Other than that, everything will be shaded in with the YR24. To finish the shading on this little guy, I am going to be using YR27, and I'm not using a lot of it. So I'm just kind of looking at my dinosaur and figuring out which parts are kind of the deepest. So that would be underneath his chin, up along the head by the fin, underneath his arm, kind of at that crease of his leg where the heart is, and maybe a little bit down on his tail. I am not using a lot of this color at all. Once I get done with the YR27, I am going to go back in with my lightest color, which was the YR23, and I'm just going to color over the whole thing, and that's just going to deepen everything just a titch. The heart's going to be super simple to color. We are using R17 as my lightest color. Then I will move into R27 and then just do a little bit of shading with the R39. A little bit goes a long way with that R39, so I just use that basically on the edges of my heart. I'm going to line up the coordinating die on him and just run it through my die cutting machine, and we are just about done with this little guy except for adding a few little highlights. Now I'm going to add a few little highlights to my little friend here. I'm using a white gel pen. I'm using a number 10, and I'm just going to add some highlights here and there. I have got to admit this is my weakest spot in card making. I just really struggle with that white gel pen. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Either I overdo it or I don't do enough. Anyway, the struggle's real. All right, that guy is all done, so we are done coloring and we can move on to the rest of the card. I'm using my Clingy Craftmate on my surface here to hold down my piece of white cardstock, which is approximately 5 1/4-ish, maybe 5.5 by 5.5. And I'm going to start with Tea-dye Distress Oxide ink, and I'm just going to kind of dry brush in that bottom edge, maybe up about an inch. What I'm doing here is just trying to create a level of sand. I'm going to be using my cloudy layer stencil to lay in the clouds on my sky. I wanted a really vivid sky for this card, so I am using Salty Ocean. I usually use tumbled glass Distress Oxide, but that was just a little bit too light for what I was looking for this time. So I'm going to start at the top of this cardstock, and I'm going to just ink up my brush off to the side and then just keep moving that stencil down. Now when I get maybe about an inch above that sandy area, I'm going to stop using my stencil, and I'm going to get most of the ink off of my brush, and I'm just going to kind of just dust in some of that color just to kind of create a little bit of a horizon line. For the ground on the bottom of this card, I didn't really have a die to cut out kind of a sandy base, and I didn't really need one. I just took a piece of tan colored cardstock, cut it to the 5.5 inches, and then just kind of took my scissors and just kind of randomly cut little waves in it. Then I went back with a little bit of Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink and just kind of inked up that top edges and into that body of the sand just to kind of give it a bit of dimension and, I don't know, just a little bit of dimension, I guess. I'm just going to use a little bit of liquid glue to glue on that little slice of land there. I have a little edge hanging off. Eventually I'll just trim that off. I'm using the Tiny Island die set to cut out 2 of the little sand hills. Now my cardstock does have some rip and stick on the back. That's just going to make it easier when I go to apply them to my card base. I have been doing a whole lot of these little die cut pieced cards. And what I do is I keep a little container full of card scraps that I have the rip and stick on. That way I can just keep going into my little stash there and fitting in my little pieces on what I have. So I'm pretty miserly with my little pieces of paper. I tend to use as much as I can. I've got the tops of my palm trees done now. I need to cut out the trunks. And as you can see here, I have a whole new piece of cardstock with some fresh rip and stick on it. So I will start in on that piece of scrap. To add a little bit more dimension and realism to my little sand hills, I'm going to go in and dust those edges with some Vintage Photo Oxide or Distress Oxide ink. And I'm just using a small blending brush here just to hit those edges. And I might just kind of pounce in some of the color in that center area also. I'll go ahead and do this on my sand hills, and then I will use some Rustic Wilderness on my palm tree fronds. I think that's what they're called, fronds. I don't know. I'm a Colorado girl, so we don't have too many of those here. For the sentiment of my card, I am using the new Starring Sentiments I Lava You, and I'm just going to cut out this shadow piece from a piece of hot purple paper. The lettering is going to be cut out of a bright orange cardstock. And again, I highly recommend using paper that has rip and stick on the back of it. It just makes it a quick and easy process when you get ready to apply those letters. To plus up those letters a little bit, I'm going to be using a little bit of Ripe Persimmon Distress Oxide ink with my small blending brush, and I'm just going to ink the bottom part of those letters and kind of brush up towards the middle. That's just going to give it a nice little bit of dimension and extra, I don't know what, a little bit extra something something. Another tool that I would not be without is my pickup tool. I'm going to use that to kind of dig out those letters and get them placed on my purple shadow here. Now I'm not going to press down these letters at all until I get them exactly where I want them, because I'm not quite sure where the little volcano is going to fit in there and how the V and the A is going to look on that first line. So I'm just going to kind of place those in there and wait until I have everything where I want it before I actually press them down real hard. I've cut my volcano out of a small piece of brown cardstock with the rip and stick on the back. And I just used that die again, but I didn't cut out the whole wording. I just kind of laid my cardstock where that volcano piece was and ran it through my die cut machine. Included in the die set are a couple other pieces that actually create the lava that's coming out of the volcano. So I'm going to use one of those pieces for the lava that's kind of spilling down the volcano and shooting up, and I've got some hot orange for that. I was pretty lucky when this one went through my die cut machine. It left some of those little volcano or the lava spurts still in the die, which makes it a lot easier to get those placed on my cards. What I'll go ahead and do is I'm going to flip that over after I peel off that protective tape, and I'm going to lay that on top of where the lava is flowing out of the volcano. And then I'm just going to use my pokey tool and poke those little lava pieces out through the holes that are on the die. It's great when it works out that way. And I've got some hot yellow for those other pieces of spewing lava. I'm using that die in the exact same way. This time my little pieces stayed within the die, so I'm going to carefully pick out that protective tape, and then I'm going to just take that die and flip it over on top of my volcano and poke those pieces of die cut paper out. Super simple. After I got this piece all put together, I remembered that I wanted to add a little bit of inking to the outside of that purple shadow. So I'm going to go back in with my tiny blending brush and ink that up with the wilted violet. Okay, now it's time to get this card put together. So I'm going to take my two sand piles, kind of figure out where they look best at the bottom of that card, and then I will peel off that protective backing and get them placed down. I want my sentiment to hang off of my little sky background a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead. I've got that one piece trimmed down to, well, the sky piece to 5 1/4 by 4, and I'm going to glue that on a piece of cardstock that is the A2 size, which is 5 1/2 by 4 1/4. To figure out exactly where I want those palm trees to go, I'm going to use my sentiment and just lay it down on that card surface along with my little triceratops, just so I can get an idea of where I want to place both of those palm trees. I want my sentiment and my dinosaur to be popping off the page, so I've got some foam dots applied to the back of that giant sentiment piece along with the back of my little triceratops. Even though the foam tape is double-sided adhesive, I like to use a little bit of glue on top of that. It just gives me a little bit of wiggle room till I can get that placed exactly where I want it before it becomes permanent. I'm going to do the same exact thing with my little triceratops and get him placed at the bottom of the card also. I always like to have a little bit of bling on my card, so I am going to put some sparkle hearts all around the sky area. It might be a little bit of overkill, but he really wants the person to know who's getting this card that he loves them. For the inside of my card, I have used one of the sentiments from the Terrific stamp set. I have stamped that on a piece of cardstock that is cut to 5 1/4 by 4 inches. I like to do this on the inside of all of my cards. I always feel like I need to beef up that back, the back of the card. So I'm going to go ahead and just glue that on the inside of my card. And we are just about done here. Now, to finish up this adorable card, we are going to go ahead and glue the card front to the card base. I like to use liquid glue just because I have problems with the tape runners sticking after a period of time. It could be my climate here. We're pretty dry. But that completes my card. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today. I will go ahead and list and link all of the supplies I use down below. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. You can also subscribe to be notified of future videos. You can follow me on Instagram at Sandy Cogdell or on my blog, sandycogdelldesigns.com. All right. Until next time, bye-bye.